I remember standing there, the chill wind biting at my face, watching my own brother-in-law, Mark, casually stroll through the rows of Christmas trees I'd spent 12 years nurturing. His hands were tucked deep in his pockets, a calculating look in his eyes, like he was sizing up inventory, not visiting family. And in that moment, as customers milled around us, laughing and searching for their perfect tree, I knew what he was truly trying to do. He wanted to take it all. My land, my livelihood, my family's future, for barely a whisper of what it was worth. And that's when I decided I would make sure it cost him everything. You know, life has a funny way of delivering its biggest lessons. For me, it started when I was 26, a union lineman in eastern Tennessee, 2 years into my marriage with Sarah. I bought 15 acres of steep, rocky mountain land outside of Knoxville. Most folks looked at it and saw nothing. Real estate agents would shake their heads. Too steep, too rocky, no utilities, accessible only by a rutted gravel road that washed out every spring. Just rocks, rhododendron thickets, and scrubby hardwood trees clinging to the mountainside. The previous owner practically gave it away for $12,000 cash. But I saw Christmas trees. That north-facing slope, the rocky, well-drained soil at 3,000 feet elevation, perfect for Fraser firs. I'd seen those choose-and-cut farms in the mountains rake in serious money between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Families driving hours from Nashville, Atlanta, even South Carolina, to make memories. Fraser firs take 8 to 12 years to reach prime selling height. That's why nobody else wanted to enter the market. Too long to wait for a paycheck. But I had patience. My lineman job paid well, pulling 16-hour shifts in January ice storms, working storm restoration in places like South Carolina or Louisiana. I lived cheap, a one-bedroom apartment, second-hand furniture, a 10-year-old Ford Ranger, rice and beans most nights. My coworkers thought I was either broke or crazy, saving 70% of every paycheck. I just wanted a piece of land of my own, something nobody could take from me. Sarah thought I'd lost my mind when I first showed her the property. She stood at the edge, looking at the slope disappearing into the trees, and asked, "What's the plan here?" Because I'm not seeing a house, a road, or anything remotely normal. I just smiled. "You're looking at a problem." "I'm looking at a setup." "A setup for what?" she asked. I twisted ankle? "For a business," I said. "Give me a few years, and you'll get it." She married a man with ambition and zero fear. Sometimes that worried her, and looking back, maybe it should have worried me a little more, too. The first 3 years nearly broke me physically. Every day off meant clearing brush and hauling rocks, cutting drainage channels, terracing slopes by hand. I'd work 12 hours on the power lines, drive an hour to the property, and clear brush with a chainsaw until it was too dark to continue. My hands were always torn up from saw work and granite edges. I lost 20 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. Some nights, I just slept in my truck because I couldn't safely drive home. In year 3, I planted my first 2,000 Fraser fir seedlings. Almost half died that first summer because I didn't understand my own drainage patterns yet. I replanted the next spring and planted another 1,500 in a new section. Years 5 through 7 were all about learning the real work, shearing trees every summer, spraying for pests, mowing, fertilizing. Each task had specific timing, or you'd set the whole operation back a year. I kept planting new sections, building inventory. By year 9, my oldest trees reached 6 feet. The farm started to look like an actual operation. That's when Mark, Sarah's brother, started coming around more often. He'd grown up in the county, knew everyone, worked in real estate and general contracting. He always had a deal working. He'd walk my tree rows and comment on how much work I was putting into land that wasn't worth much on paper. He said it friendly enough, but something about the way he assessed the property always felt like a calculation, not a compliment. Year 10, I sold my first Christmas trees. A simple choose-and-cut operation. That first season, I cleared $8,000 in 6 weeks. By year 12, the transformation was complete. Fraser firs in full rotation, 7,000 trees at various stages of maturity. I'd built a proper farm store, added hot-spiced apple juice and kettle corn. We hosted school field trips, scout groups. The county tourism board even featured us. I quit the lineman job. It was the hardest decision, walking away from union benefits, but the farm was generating more revenue than my wages. Sarah handled the store and customer experience, I managed the trees. Our marriage was solid, built on shared purpose. Years 13 and 14, business grew steadily. Then, the county sent a letter about property line discrepancies. The letter arrived in early March of year 13, mixed in with seed catalogs. Official county letter, formal language, talking about potential survey errors from decades ago. Said our property might be smaller than our deed indicated, that some of our land might fall within an unrecorded county right-of-way. I called the assessor's office, got transferred 4 times before a woman with a bored voice said these reviews happen periodically, just routine verification. Nothing to worry about. But I worried. The government doesn't send certified letters about property boundaries unless someone has a reason to question them. That Saturday, Mark showed up. Heard you got a letter from the county, he said, hands in his pockets. Those things can turn into a mess fast. It's just a boundary review, supposedly. Sure, he smirked. And sometimes supposedly turns into sign here. Why do you care all of a sudden? Because you're family, and I know how this county plays. His eagerness felt wrong. Mark had always been mildly interested in the farm, but never this invested in county paperwork. I mentioned his visit to Sarah at dinner. She said Mark knew the county government better than anyone, that he was genuinely trying to help. She told me I should take him up on his offer instead of being stubborn. I didn't call Mark. Instead, I drove to the county clerk's office. 2 weeks later, it clicked. The county had been discussing a road improvement project for nearly 2 years. Widening the main route to the interstate. But the proposed alignment didn't follow the existing road. It cut across private property, requiring land from 7 owners. My 15 acres sat in the middle of the preferred corridor. A developer, Summit Peak Properties, had been buying land on both sides of the proposed route for over 2 years. Their plans showed a resort needing direct highway access. The road project wasn't about safety. It was about building infrastructure for private development with public money. Commissioner Davies's financial disclosures showed a consulting relationship with Ridgeline Consulting. State corporate records showed Ridgeline was a subsidiary of Summit Peak Properties. Then I found Mark's name, buyer agent for 3 of Summit Peak's acquisitions, totaling over $2 million. Mark wasn't helping me. He was working for the people trying to take my land. I told Sarah what I'd found. Showed her Mark's name on the transactions, the timeline connecting his deals to the road project. She listened, then said there had to be an explanation. He did real estate all over the county. Maybe he'd taken the listings without knowing about the bigger picture. She said I was connecting dots that might not connect. I understood her position. He was her brother. But I asked her to be careful what she shared with him. 2 weeks later, Commissioner Davies and 2 officials showed up at my farm unannounced. They stayed near the driveway, photographing buildings and trees, asking questions about my operation. Davies mentioned the county would make offers soon, said they preferred working cooperatively. I asked about figures. We're looking at something in the $15,000 range for the land, plus a little for improvements. You're joking, I said, utterly floored. I'm not. That's what the appraisal supports. My trees alone are worth more than that standing here. We're not buying your business. We're acquiring land. Their appraiser had used comps for undeveloped mountain land, steep terrain, limited access, no utilities. $800 to $1,200 an acre. The appraiser had never even set foot on the property, relying on records and aerial photos. I pointed out this wasn't undeveloped land. It was a working Christmas tree farm with 12 years of inventory in the ground, 7,000 trees representing tens of thousands in seedling costs, soil amendments, pest control. My accountant had valued the operation as a going concern at just over $2 million when I refinanced. Their offer was barely 1% of that. Davy said trees were considered agricultural crops attached to condemned land, valued at salvage cost, not retail. Business goodwill wasn't compensable in eminent domain. I asked if their appraiser had any experience valuing working agricultural operations. He just told me to think carefully about my options and consult with someone who understood local processes. After they left, I checked my phone. A text from Mark asking if the commissioner had stopped by, offering again to help me understand the situation. He'd known they were coming. I spent 6 weeks preparing for a fight. Every interaction with county officials got documented. I photographed every county vehicle on my property, requested copies of every public record related to the road project. I built a detailed timeline. I learned about North Carolina's present use value taxation program, the state's forestry management program, my approved erosion control plan. None of these were magic shields, but each created procedural requirements, generated documentation, bought time, and created obstacles. I started attending county commission meetings every Thursday night. Sat in the same seat in the third row where all 5 commissioners could see me watching. During public comment, I asked polite questions about the project's environmental review, the traffic studies, the notification timeline, the cost-benefit analysis. The commissioners got visibly uncomfortable. Then I asked the question that changed everything. Keep your comments to the project, not personal allegations, Commissioner Miller cut in. This is the project. Conflicts of interest are part of the project. Sir, Commissioner Roberts leaned forward. State your question clearly. Why wasn't Commissioner Davies recused when he has a disclosed financial relationship tied to the developer? That's not how this works. Davies spluttered. Miller jumped back in, out of order. Direct complaints through proper channels. I stayed calm. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking about ethics compliance based on the Commissioner's own filed disclosures. The public has a right to understand whether recusal protocols are being followed. Roberts looked around the room, then said she'd allow the question if I could cite the specific document. I had copies. I read from Davies's annual disclosure, identifying his consulting relationship with Ridgeline Consulting, then from state corporate records showing Ridgeline as a wholly owned subsidiary of Summit Peak Properties. Then I noted Summit Peak was the primary beneficiary of the proposed road alignment. Davies's face went red. He claimed there was no conflict, his work was unrelated. I asked what services Ridgeline provided that were unrelated to real estate development, given its parent company's sole business was real estate development. Miller interrupted again. Inappropriate, potentially defamatory. Roberts hesitated, then said the question deserved an answer. 2 other commissioners nodded. Davies said he'd provide written clarification. The meeting moved on, but I'd made my point. A reporter from the local weekly approached me in the parking lot. Other property owners found me afterward. Emily, who ran an apple orchard. David and Brenda Sterling, whose family had farmed this area for generations. Susan, a retired teacher. Alex and Chloe Miller, a young couple who'd bought property the previous year. All had received similar letters, lowball offers. We started meeting weekly at Emily's farmhouse. 6 families total. Peter's name appeared throughout our documentation. He'd contacted 3 of the families, offered to help. He'd been the buyer's agent on Summit Peak purchases near 2 of the targeted parcels. Sarah noticed I was distracted, taking calls outside. She asked what was going on. I told her about the coalition, the pattern, the evidence showing Mark was deeper into this. I showed her the specific transactions. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said Mark had called her that afternoon, asking specific questions about our situation, if we'd hired a lawyer yet. She'd answered, because he was family. I asked her not to share information about our legal strategy with him anymore. Anything she told him would likely reach the county and the developer within hours. She agreed, but I could see it bothered her. The formal eminent domain notice arrived 8 weeks after my first commission meeting. Certified mail, dense legal language citing public necessity for transportation infrastructure improvement. 30 days to respond to their compensation offer or they'd proceed. I found Dr. Evelyn Vance through a property rights legal organization in Charleston. She specialized in eminent domain abuse cases. She asked about my creek and whether there had been any state environmental consultation. When I said no, she nodded. The county's environmental documentation was suspiciously thin for a project affecting a protected watershed that supplied municipal drinking water downstream. She agreed to take my case. Dr. Vance challenged the eminent domain on 3 grounds: genuine public necessity, incomplete environmental review, and Commissioner Davies's ongoing participation despite his financial relationships. She filed discovery requests demanding all communications between county officials and Summit Peak Properties. The county's response was immediate and coordinated. Within 2 weeks, 4 different agencies showed up: fire marshal, health department, building official, state agriculture. Each inspection hit during pre-season prep. Each inspector asked questions that suggested someone had briefed them on weak points. I handled each visit calmly, provided every document. None found violations, but together they consumed 2 weeks of my schedule during the most critical time of year. Sarah called me from work one afternoon, sounding confused. Mark had left her a voicemail asking detailed questions about our court filings. He'd mentioned Dr. Vance by name, specific motions, discovery requests. We hadn't told anyone outside the coalition about our legal strategy. I hadn't even told Sarah which specific documents Dr. Vance had submitted. She asked how Mark could possibly know. I said someone at the county or the developer legal team was feeding him information. This was exactly why I'd asked her to be careful. She was quiet. Then she said she hadn't told Mark anything about our legal filings. Said she'd kept her promise. If Mark knew those details, he was getting them from somewhere inside the county's legal response entirely. That landed with her. Mark knowing things he couldn't have learned from Sarah meant he had inside access to information shared only between adversarial legal teams. He wasn't just a real estate agent. He was coordinated with the scheme at a deeper level. She said she wanted to talk to him directly. The Saturday before Thanksgiving was our busiest shoes and cut day. We were slammed. Customers arriving right at 9. I worked the field, Sarah handled the store. By early afternoon, we'd sold over 40 trees. The parking area was full. A family from Nashville told me they'd been coming for 4 years. A retired couple mentioned they'd read the newspaper article about our situation and wanted to support someone fighting back. Mark showed up unannounced around 3. He walked through the field toward me, hands in his jacket pockets, like he was inspecting inventory rather than visiting family. He knew I couldn't make a scene. He waited until a customer drove away, then started in on his pitch. Said he'd been thinking about our situation. Said he understood I felt strongly, but needed to consider Sarah's future. Said the county's offer wasn't great, but he might be able to negotiate better terms if I'd let him help. I told him this wasn't the time or place. He kept talking. Said fighting the county was expensive and pointless. Said most people who resisted ended up with less after legal fees. I asked him to leave. He left, but not before looking around at my operation, my customers, my store, like he was assessing assets. Sarah asked Mark directly about his involvement at a family dinner 2 weeks later. She told me about it that night. She'd started casual, then asked specifically about Summit Peak Properties. His demeanor changed. He got defensive. Said she was starting to sound like me. Said he was trying to help the family, and it was insulting to question his motives. She asked how he'd known about our court filings and Dr. Vance's name when she hadn't told him anything. He said people talked. Small county. She told him nobody outside our legal team should have known those details unless they had access to the county's response documents. Peter changed his approach. Said she needed to convince me to settle before I destroyed our finances. Said the county always won. The smart move was taking the money. She asked why he cared so much. He said he cared about his sister's future. Then he said something that broke her trust completely. He said the road was going to happen regardless of what we did. The development was already funded. Our property was going to be acquired one way or another. The only question was whether we got reasonable compensation or got dragged through court and ended up with less. She asked how he knew it was approved when the road project was supposedly still under review. He didn't have an answer. She came home that night and told me every word. Said Mark had talked about our property like it was already gone. The following Thursday evening, Mark showed up at our house while Sarah was at her mother's. I was doing equipment maintenance when I heard his truck. He knocked like he expected to be welcomed. When I opened the door, he launched into his pitch. Said he cared about Sarah and couldn't watch her husband destroy their future over stubbornness. Said the county had finalized their offer, it was the best I'd get. I needed to take it. I asked how much money he stood to make if Summit Peak's project went through. He didn't deny involvement. Said he was a professional doing legitimate business. Said the road was happening whether I liked it or not because the money was already committed. Then he crossed a line. Look, I'm trying to save you from getting crushed. You're not saving me. You're selling me. You need to think about Sarah. Don't use my wife like a bargaining chip, I said, my voice low. It would be a shame if inspectors started caring a lot more during your busiest weeks. I told him I'd been recording since I opened the door. He laughed, said Tennessee was one-party consent, wouldn't prove anything. I told him to leave and not come back. Any future communication went through my attorney. If he came onto my property again, I'd file a trespassing complaint. He left, but sat in his truck at the end of my driveway for 15 minutes making phone calls. Sarah got home around 11. I showed her the recording. Let her hear her brother threaten our livelihood, dismiss her concerns, reveal how deep he was in this. She sat on the couch with her hands pressed against her face. Didn't speak for a long time. Then she said she was done with him. I filed a trespassing complaint with the sheriff the next morning. Dr. Vance added the recording to our court filings as evidence of coordinated intimidation. She forwarded copies to the State Bureau of Investigation's Public Corruption Unit. The FBI opened a preliminary inquiry within 10 days. The judge granted a preliminary injunction blocking all county action against our property. No seizure, no condemnation, no force-taking. Sarah called her mother and explained she wouldn't attend family events where Mark was present. The conversation was brutal. Her mother cried, accused her of destroying the family over a land dispute. Sarah told her mother that Mark had threatened their livelihood to close a business deal. Said she'd chosen her marriage over her brother's greed. She held that line. Even when it cost her. 3 weeks after the injunction, a lawyer for Summit Peak called with a private settlement offer. Full market value based on independent appraisal, plus a premium for immediate agreement. Real money, more than I'd realistically make in 4 years of normal operation. I spent a week considering. The money made financial sense. We could relocate. But I also knew why they were offering. They needed my parcel specifically. Without my 15 acres, the whole corridor didn't connect. Every other piece they'd assembled was worthless if they couldn't get through my land to the highway. That's why they were willing to pay real money now. I talked to the coalition. 2 others had received similar offers. Emily was considering acceptance due to health stress. David said taking the money would prove intimidation worked. I thought about 14 years transforming this worthless mountain land. About walking away because someone with more money wanted what I'd built. I called back and declined. Dr. Vance had been cultivating media contacts. A reporter named Thomas Reed at the Knoxville paper had been investigating regional corruption for years. Our case gave him everything. His article ran front page. Road project documents revealed developer ties to county officials. The timeline, acquisitions, Davies's relationships, the pressure pattern. Mark's name appeared prominently as the agent facilitating developer purchases while pressuring his own family to surrender their property. That Christmas season was our best ever. People came specifically because they'd read the story. Families told us they were proud to support someone fighting back. We sold out weeks early. The commission held an emergency meeting in January. The room was packed. Local business owners, farmers, retirees. 3 major campaign donors sent letters withdrawing support from commissioners who'd backed the project. 4 commissioners voted to suspend the road project pending independent review. Davies voted alone against, then held a press conference, accusing colleagues of caving to media pressure. The public didn't buy it. Mark's professional life collapsed completely in the months following the article. In a county this small, reputation is everything. His listings dried up. The local board of realtors opened a formal ethics inquiry after multiple complaints. Rather than face formal proceedings, Mark surrendered his real estate license voluntarily. The damage was permanent. Sarah's relationship with her mother eventually stabilized after months of painful conversation. Her mother finally accepted that Mark had become someone willing to hurt his own family for money. The SBI investigation expanded quickly. Subpoenas for financial records revealed the full scope. Davies had received over $300,000 from developer-connected entities over a 4-year period. Payments disguised as consulting fees, speaking honoraria, political contributions routed through PACs. Bank records showed deposits hitting Davies's accounts within days of key commission votes. The emails were devastating. Communications between Davies and the developer's representatives discussing which property owners were vulnerable, which ones needed aggressive tactics. Mark appeared in several threads as the contact for applying family pressure on our property. One message noted he'd assured them he could convince his sister's husband to see reason. The Attorney General's office got involved. They filed criminal charges against Davies for bribery, corruption, and abuse of public office. The developer CEO faced charges for conspiracy to commit bribery. Mark was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the public court filings. That created a permanent public record that any future employer, business partner, or licensing board would discover. The eminent domain case collapsed. The county filed to dismiss their own condemnation. The judge granted dismissal with prejudice, meaning they could never refile. Dr. Vance negotiated settlements for all coalition members, full reimbursement of legal fees, formal written apologies, policy reform commitments. My settlement totaled $41,000 for legal expenses alone. But the real victory wasn't the money. The county commission adopted new conflict of interest rules. They strengthened property owner protections. Davies's trial lasted 2 weeks. Bank records, emails, testimony from county staff who'd been pressured. The jury convicted on all counts after 4 hours. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in state prison plus full restitution. The developer company went into receivership. Their land holdings sold at auction for fractions of purchase prices. Conservation groups bought most of the parcels. Mark, last I heard, was doing property management work in South Carolina. The licensing surrender and court naming followed him. No legitimate brokerage would take the liability risk of hiring someone with his documented history. Sarah exchanges occasional texts with him about their mother's health, nothing more. I expanded the operation the following spring. Bought an adjacent 20 acres from the developer bankruptcy auction at a fraction of what they'd paid. Planted 4,000 new seedlings. Built a larger farm store. Hired full-time employees. Sarah and I came out stronger than we went in. The crisis forced conversations and decisions that proved where we stood. She chose our marriage over blood loyalty. I showed I'd fight for what we built. 14 years ago, I bought steep mountain land nobody wanted. Everyone said I was throwing money away. I built something from nothing through work most people wouldn't have patience for. When my own brother-in-law tried to steal it through corruption and government abuse, I stayed calm, built a coalition, hired the right attorney, protected my marriage, and made every single person involved regret the day they decided my land looked like easy money. Some lessons cost more than others. Mark learned the expensive way that you don't target a man's land, his livelihood, or his family. Especially when that man has spent 12 years building something he'll burn down the world to keep. What would you have done in my shoes?